Okay, so this is quite nice. Just intimate little group. Yeah, absolutely. So today we're going to give you a little presentation on what we've called the power of the arts. So to give you a bit of a background on who we are. So my name's Elise and I trained at drama school as an actress, and then during that process I realised I don't really want to do that anymore. And I worked with an incredible inclusive theatre company in Switzerland where I observed a disabled-led organisation and disabled-led artists and actors and musicians and everyone working together. And it was absolutely incredible. The quality of the work that they were creating surpassed anything that I did in my training or anything that I was around. And I just looked at it and went, this is so special. It was a place where they were just absolutely excelling. And I just got this real passion for this, for inclusion in the arts. So then I started as a TA in schools, and I was just trying to explore what this might look like for within a SEND organisation. And I started with an IKEA bag on my back full of like lots of little bits and bobs, and I was working in various different rooms, wherever would have me basically, and tried to explore what drama looks like for young people with special educational needs. And then I ended up at Queensmill School in London, in West London, which is an autism-specific school, very similar to the cohort that we have here on site, so quite complex needs. And it was there where for the last 9 years of my career, I developed a whole creative arts department there, a whole curriculum of assessment and programming, and got my PGC in drama teaching as well. So my context is basically writing and developing curriculums, creative curriculums for the cohort that we have on site here. And I also conduct a bit of research into the impact of what that might look like, and we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Hi, I'm Tanya. I went to university and did theatre and performance studies. I then started my journey at Prior's Court about 15, 16 years ago as a teaching assistant, and I saw how powerful the arts were with the young people. I then went on to various other SEN schools and developed my skills. I then saw the engagement that the young people get and the therapeutic approach that you could take to that. I then retrained as a drama therapist and was able to introduce drama therapy into one of the previous schools that I worked in. This is also where I did some research looking into sensory storytelling for young people who are nonverbal and looking at the different ways that you can develop communication through that. I absolutely loved doing the drama therapy, but really missed being in the classroom and wanted to be able to use both sets of skills. So I then went on to train as a teacher, but I trained on the job within an SEN school. And then this amazing opportunity and the Bespoke Performing Arts Centre came up, so I'm really excited to start the journey at Prior's Court.
Yeah, I should also say I'm going to be working at Prior's Court. So we're going to be co-leading the Performing Arts Centre together to sort of explore what these curriculums look like and to try and make the most out of that beautiful, beautiful centre that we've got. So today what we're going to do is have a little look at some of the research that sort of supports why the arts is so effective with autistic individuals, and then we're also going to touch on what our experience says. And this is particularly important because a lot of the research that we will be quoting and referencing, when you actually look at the participants in that research, they do not have complex needs. And that is with the majority of autism research. To include the population that we have here with all of their needs is very difficult. So for me, the research within this field is equally as important as the experiential aspect from a teaching and learning point of view. So let's start with drama. So when we look at what drama teaching strategies are, it looks like a million different things. That's the thing with drama. You say drama and then you have no idea what you're walking into. So this might involve things like role playing, intermedial multi-sensory storytelling, improvisation, watching theatre, rhythmic movement-based games. There's a wonderful company called Flute Theatre who basically simplify they've done about 5 Shakespeare shows, including Pericles. And I think I took 4-year-olds to Pericles, which everyone was like, really? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And they've basically simplified it into a series of 10 sensory games, which are based on repetition, movement, spinning, rocking, falling, jumping, like everything that our kids love to do. And actually, because I think, Shakespeare is so inaccessible. It's inaccessible for, I never really liked Shakespeare when I was growing up, or even when I was doing my studies. But actually, what Shakespeare does, it really explores the fundamentals of what it is to be alive, what it is to see someone, meet someone, feel something, love something, shift. It's really just, that very baseline experience of what it is to be human. And for our kids who experience that times 100, it's actually a really beautiful insight and parallel to that. So that's something that I absolutely love. And just to say that they can do it. It's not. You can find a way to distill everything to its core. Puppetry is a great one, very visually stimulating, engages all the sort of joint attention, grabs their attention immediately. Script writing as well, and devising group theatre. So those are just a handful of different things that you might see in a drama classroom. Now, the positive impact on autistic pupils, the main area that's been researched in terms of where it can benefit is on social communication. So there's been quite a few systematic reviews into lots that take into consideration lots of research, and it's shown positive effects on social responsiveness, acknowledging perspectives, understanding non-verbal cues, joint attention skills, so that very sort of initial ability to shift your attention from an object to a person to the surrounding context, so that very sort of early development of social communication, and initiating interactions. I always love that moment where I do an exercise where it's like a sword fighting activity just between two, and all we have to do is we do a gesture like that and the other one jumps. And I love, it's so simple, and they can, everyone can pick it up just through modelling, regardless of ability. And then you play with that tension that's built. So you do it and you model it, you get it into the system, and then you're like, when am I going to go? When am I going to go? And then you see the child then goes, Gah! Or they verbalise or they do something. And it's that point of tension within drama that I think specifically allows for them to initiate and them to draw in, because you've got them captivated, you've got them in the moment. And I think it's a great strategy for that. Confidence. So this is maybe around the flexibility in the drama classroom. There's no right, there's no wrong. You are free to be yourself and to be you. And this, when they go from, especially in a mainstream environment or more of a resource-based environment, they're going through their maths in this way. There is a very linear, very structured right or wrong here. But in drama, it's a place where anything goes. And they can have the confidence to share their opinions and build their sense of self within the room. Facial emotional recognition, quite straightforward in terms of characters, sort of drawing through story, what this might look like on the face. Do a lot of work with mirrors and looking at yourself, looking at others. Collaboration, quite a lot. The nature of drama is quite collaborative. Like there will be solo moments, but in general, the drama classroom is one of collaboration. Reduced anxiety. So this research was looking into the effect that it had on emotional regulation after drama sessions as well. And they found that having that release, having that big physical play, allowing them to be free to be themselves, had a real positive impact on reducing their anxieties after the sessions. And interpersonal synchrony. This is one of my favourite pieces of research. This was actually looking into the Shakespeare rhythmic movement-based games. And the participants did have quite complex needs, and they were wearing, if we managed to get them on to wear it, they were wearing basically sort of a version of a Fitbit watch, which was tracking their physiological responses, and also their movement in the space as well. And what was really interesting is when it was all filmed, and when it came to analysing the data, when we were looking at the footage, all of the children, some children were sat around in the circle, getting up when they were meant to be getting up, going down, verbalising when they were encouraged to, modelling, doing the sort of the actions and all of that. There was one child that was facing the wall in the corner, like that, moving slightly, but just facing the wall. You would look at that and go, complete lack of engagement, or maybe they don't like it, maybe they're not in there. He was the most physiologically engaged with all of the rhythms that were happening, all of the movements, because he was stimming and moving in perfect time with the actors that were there. And even his physical movements corresponded to when the actors were going up, down, left, right. But it just looked completely different. And I think drama is an amazing space where we can start to reframe what engagement looks like. Because I think there's all this good sitting, quiet hands, all of this, especially if you've got individuals, like you were saying, in a mainstream environment where that's the expectation of behaviour. And actually, yeah, I love the fact that the person that was facing the wall, looking like they weren't engaged at all, was actually the most engaged. So we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into the drama research, just because both of us have done some. So I did a piece of research looking into the impact of clowning-based drama sessions on social emotional well-being. So what a clowning-based session would look like for me would be basically play. It is an opportunity for the children to play. So we would start with a hello activity, we'd move on to a self-expressive activity where they might choose a costume piece or a mask, very free to be themselves and to do whatever they want to do. Then we would play a series of games. Now, I played these, some people say, is it age appropriate for various people? This is what I was doing when I was 19 years old at drama school. They teach you how to play again in order to be good actors. So when Ofsted come in and they go, Grandma's Footsteps, really? I go, yes, really. Look at this curriculum from a drama school of a BA level curriculum. These fundamental skills that we've lost touch with are essential in building everyone's social emotional well-being, I would argue, but specifically for these children. Then we'd move on to the games. So they would basically choose one of these games and I'd shape them around their interests quite a lot of the time. And then we would say goodbye. Now, the sort of principles behind this teaching approach is play, have lightness with things, don't take things too seriously. Yes, even with Shakespeare, when everyone's dying and it's all dramatic and everything, but in that moment, treat every decision with lightness. Openness, saying yes and to anything that's offered into the space rather than no but, this is what I've got on the structure. So an example of that, we're playing Duck, Duck, Goose, and one of the children's going, g, 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 g. They're goosing everyone. We're going to go with that. We're going to roll with what's going to happen when every single person in the room is a goose. I'm not going to then go, sit back down. It's one person at a time. There's a place for turn taking, but this is not one of them, okay? And complicity, togetherness, so that sense of, this is essentially, yeah, just following the lead of that other person. It ties in a lot to intensive interaction work, so that fundamental mirroring, and again, just letting the individual that you're working with lead the way. So the research I conducted had two main questions. If and how do the sessions impact social emotional well-being, and what are the important features of teaching that promote this? Methods, I'll go very quickly through this. I used loads of different methods to investigate this. I did observations, interviews with staff, and interviews with pupils, which you can imagine were absolutely hilarious. They took my symbols, played with them, threw them in the air. It became very descriptive, qualitative things because they weren't following any sort of structure. But actually it told me a lot in terms of that they don't want to do the structured activity. They want to play with the symbols I put in front of them. That's data in itself. The participants, so I had 4 autistic participants with diverse complex support needs. This is quite rare in drama research, and this was what I really wanted to get that big sort of range of the needs in there. And I had 5 staff members that I interviewed. Then I brought all of this together to create some themes that might help us understand what's going on in the room. So the observation results showed that they were all experiencing behaviours that indicated a sense of positive social emotional well-being. So there was behaviours associated with happiness, sense of self, sense of other, flexibility, and all of those sections. And there were things happening in the room that were associated with that. The reflexive thematic analysis through the interviews really placed an emphasis on the importance of giving pupils power in the room. So the importance of freedom, calling pupils to play rather than a demand-based approach, the power of the stage as well, that giving them that moment to shine, that moment where, yes, okay, it's a group activity, but actually right now it's me. I've got the microphone. I'm going to say whatever I want into this moment and have that positive reinforcement. And we had some children that would really struggle with that to start off with and would just do it sat down. But then in the end, they were like, through observation, they understood that there was something about that stepping up onto the stage as well, where they felt quite powerful in that moment. And yeah, coming away from tradition, daring to break the rules. There's a lot of research out there that promotes a lot of structure, and what this was starting to pull out was, okay, we can have a structure, but what happens if we play with that and we're a bit flexible with that and we're not particularly rigid with that? Maybe some really interesting things can start happening. So the effective teaching strategies were having a playful approach to rules and structure, being open and flexible to all the suggestions that are there, and the main one, encouraging mutual enjoyment from both staff and students. When I go into a room, as long as I can make the staff laugh or the staff have a bit of a good time, I know how much that trickles down into the children and how much that genuine modelling, not just modelling from a perspective of I'm happy, I'm this, from a genuine sense of enjoyment, that's one of the most powerful strategies that we found. So Tanya.
So I conducted my research as part of my MA in drama therapy. I worked with a group of young people with autism. All of them were non-verbal. They had communication aids. And the idea behind the research was to explore how sensory storytelling could enhance different forms of communication. So I ran weekly sessions for 10 weeks. And I wrote detailed observation reports after each session. I was really fortunate that I could video half of the sessions. So my sessions were around 45 to 50 minutes. And when I came to look at my research at the end to complete my dissertation, I could see lots of communication that I didn't notice when I was in the room. So I could slow down the video. I could take, maybe an hour would take me 10 hours to go through to gain all the footage, but I could see there was a hand movement between one child and another child, and I could see kind of the movement of some fabric, or as Elise was saying, one of the young people may have had their back, but what I didn't see was kind of their foot was going to the music or another child was going up to them. So communication was huge. Communication wasn't verbal. Also, all the young people were staffed one-to-one, so I did some support with the staff before they came into the sessions, because for me, it wasn't about the staff leading the young people. It was giving the young people the opportunity to discover and express themselves within these sessions. And similarly to what Elisa said in terms of literature, so there isn't an awful lot of literature written around drama, around kind of the real positive impacts it can have on young people with autism, other than those potentially who maybe are higher functioning autism. I use quite a lot of intensive interaction to support with kind of the development, so lots of mirroring, and also developmental drama, so looking at kind of the age that the young person was at and taking kind of some of the activities to that age. So rather than, I had a group of 14 to 19-year-olds, but again, similarly, in line with Elise, was I looked at games and activities that were suitable for their age to kind of get that development. So we looked at, over 10 weeks, it was the story of the Snow Queen. So what I wanted to do was to offer a small group activity. I wanted to create a safe space. So to create this safe space, I used quite a lot of repetitive elements. So I wanted to ensure that the beginning of each session and the end of each session was exactly the same, so that the young people knew when we were going to start and when we were going to finish, and all through the middle was all about self-expression and play. It was to develop social interactions with others, to develop their self-confidence and awareness of others. And I did teach interviews at the beginning and at the end, and teachers were able to let me know that actually within the classroom there'd been a development with kind of how the young people interacted in that space since they participated in the drama therapy sessions, because they were all from within similar areas in the school. It was also looking at different ways of communicating and developing those communication skills as well. So this is just kind of an overview of what I did. So when I looked at all the notes that I'd made, or the video footage, I was looking at engagement and interactions within the sessions. So I was looking at kind of the interactions with the staff, the interactions with the whole group, and how long they were actually staying in the space. So initially some of the young people left the space and then came back, but actually over time you could see that confidence increase and the time that they spent within the session actually grew. They're kind of looking at what was it that the young people were engaging with within the session, and they were actually engaging quite a lot with their senses. So they kind of displayed that through their body language, through different vocalizations. There was a lot of communication through hand and gesture with both myself and with other young people in the session. And this kind of self-development for the young people was that it became much more animated over time. So the staff became more animated, the young people then became more animated, the engagement with materials grew. Through repetition, their confidence and trust grew within the sessions. So, yeah, I've got this.
Yeah, I think obviously you can tell that drama is very much our thing, but we are going to be offering, and I think I'm quite glad that it is, because I think drama is often the subject that people are like, how is my child going to engage with that? Because my associations with that is Shakespeare, standing up on a stage, you know, a lot of sort of, it connotates a lot of like verbal communication, and actually just like trying to really distill that down into something that's more accessible. But for music, some of the teaching structures, so I'm actually going to sort of touch more on what we're going to be doing here for the teaching structures in terms of how we're going to make this accessible for our young people. So the teaching structures would be listening and responding to music, making sounds, and interacting through sound. So these are the three areas that we would develop activities around. The positive impact on pupils, there's been evidence around verbal development in terms of, and this is specifically autistic pupils as well. Emotional regulation, music can have a huge calming effect and regulatory experience in the body. I think everyone associates that when you're feeling in a specific mood and you listen to a specific song, it can either amplify that or bring you right down. Social interaction, again, I mean, it's really interesting because all of these creative subjects, identity construction. So the arts forms quite a big part of everybody's identity. I think I always use the example of like when you go on a first date and you're there and the conversations quite often lead to, what are your favourite films? What TV have you been watching? What music do you listen to? It's one of those really fundamental things that people associate with their identity. And if that aligns with another person, that can be a real point of communication and bonding for somebody. So it can develop a sort of sense of self and identity, and also be a tool to connect with others that also share these interests. And emotional recognition as well. It's sort of similar to the emotional regulation, using music and using a different way to sort of articulate what a certain feeling might feel like or evoke in an individual. Dance. The dance teaching structures, again, very similar to music. It's this idea of responding to movement, so watching and having a reaction and a response to that. Making movements themselves and interacting with others through movement. So this is the whole collaborative, the bottom one, interacting, is that whole collaborative nature. Making movements is the doing of the subject itself, the sort of skill development in dance itself. And responding to movement is the sort of watching and developing a sense of understanding about what it is that they're watching in that art subject. The positive impact on pupils that's been evidenced, again, is communication, it's social communication. That's the big area that we're going to see a lot of overlap, and we're going to be working quite closely with speech and language as well to try and see how we can collaborate and support each other. Spatial awareness as well, so this ties into all of our healthiness work here. Increased focus, so again this idea of after you can release physically and get that sort of sensory aspect out, whether or not in a next session you're more able to focus and concentrate on something for an extended period of time. Social friendships as well, dancing together, sharing those joyful experiences together in the dance classroom. So as I said, there's very little research conducted with individuals that includes the non-speaking population with complex needs. I think this research says there's only 6% of research includes those with intellectual disabilities, and only 2% of that is with non-speaking individuals. So that highlights out of 100% of the research, only 2% includes this population. So therefore, we're going to talk a little bit about our experience. For me, the most important thing is it has the power to bring joy. And I don't mean joy as a wishy-washy outcome. I mean happiness as something that we could potentially measure, that is something incredibly powerful for these individuals who, because of their struggles in the world and how the world is not designed for them, they can live a lot of their lives being dysregulated or feeling upset or feeling like they don't belong. So this joy within this context as an incredibly meaningful outcome. And I've just captured a few of the smiles. This one's my absolute favourite from Kew Glastonbury, where the joy, you can just see that all captured in those pictures and those videos.
I think so since September, I came in and started some drama sessions with the young people across the school. And I think initially a lot of the staff were maybe nervous about playing, about when was the last time they played, when was the last time they were able to be expressive. And over the period of time from September to now, you can sense the joy with the staff. So when the staff are engaging and they're playing, and we've got the young people, at the moment we're using a big bit of elastic, and staff and young people are inside it, and you don't realise quite how far you can stretch. And then we've got everybody kind of springing into the middle and running across, and all you can hear is young people laughing, and all the staff are starting to laugh. So it's definitely got kind of that power to bring joy and develop with that as well.
Absolutely. So the power to connect with staff. So I think this is a pupil that I used to work with, Ali, and he was very complex, non-speaking, couldn't get him in the classroom, couldn't get him anywhere. With music, he developed this absolute love for Carlos, the teacher there, and he was breaking down the door to try and get in any lesson, even if there were the 18-year-olds in there. Like, he was desperately trying to get there, and that seeing that motivation and seeing what he can do, and actually then they incorporated Carlos into his structure, and Carlos and music into his structure to help him access a huge variety of things. So those pupils that might be, we can really start developing those passions for the subjects and then using that passion to influence them across a variety of their learning areas.
I think Elise and I ran some art in movement workshops, and one of the young people, they find it quite challenging to kind of come to sessions. Their kind of transitions are around sight, and we had lots of music playing, lots of art equipment. This young person came in. Initially, they were kind of observing, experiencing the space. When the music went on, you could kind of see that their body was starting to move, and then they were starting to begin to explore some of the sensory elements of the day. Once their session had finished, they left. They then wanted to return multiple times throughout the day because they got that enjoyment from the music and that freedom and that expression. And I think it's over time what Elise and I are going to be able to do is draw on those strengths from those young people and use them to support them across their day.
Definitely. So the power to connect peers as well. There's actually quite a few, and I think especially here where it is, you've got that. My last context was 10 pupils with about 5 members of staff in there, just because of the resources were about 30% of what we have here. But what also happens with the one-to-one support is that there might not be as many opportunities for those relationships to be built with peers, or you have to structure them in a little bit more. And I think the arts can be a real space where we can work on that. And this was a really unlikely friendship. They were in 2 different, one was in primary and one was in the early years department. He was only a few years younger than him. But they basically, Max, this one on the right, he ran into the classroom completely by accident, was obviously running, struggles with a transition or something, was like, that looks fun, I'll go in there instead. Joined the primary session and just completely became besotted with Reese, this individual, who Reese, completely non-speaking, not a word, very good sort of physical communication and gestural communication, but not a word. Max does not stop speaking. So on paper, you would never put them in a room together. But what this experience really taught me was that actually we need to really be open with our groups and our structures to see and to allow them to shape the friendships that they want and to follow their lead with that, because they continue to surprise you every day, but especially with their friendships and their connections, they might do that. And that was through the play. That was just, through grandma's footsteps or dressing up and having, a bit of that role play aspect, a bit of that play. And they just absolutely, and then they were taking those skills and they actually changed Max's playtime so that he could go and join Reese in the playground time where they played all these games that you were having in the classroom, so you could see them utilising what they'd experienced in the classroom in another context, which is everything that we want our children to do.
I think reflecting on, in terms of what we've seen kind of with the power of the arts already since September, is that one class that I'm working with who are very, very sensory and initially struggled to come into the session. So I thought about how I can make this session adaptable for all the young people. So I started with lots and lots of different sensory equipment all over the different tables, music, lights, and it was a very free flow that the young people could kind of move around, have a look. Over time, I built up the structure, so then it was, okay, we'll come in, we'll find a way to say hello, and then you can kind of go and we'll explore again. Currently, the class are now playing together, so we'll have the parachute, all the staff will come and hold it outside, all the young people will come and hold it outside, we'll move it up and down, they'll sit underneath it together, they'll move across kind of beneath the parachute, playing together, making that connection. I discussed this with another member of staff who actually saw this group in a different context in the school and said they walked into the session and you could feel that there was kind of a connection between the groups. So I think it's knowing that kind of we can start to filter kind of the arts through and kind of the power that it can have.
I think there's a bit of a myth as well, there is a bit of a myth that autistic individuals, because of their struggles and their differences with social interaction, they therefore don't want to be a part of the group. That's complete nonsense. It's that we've never made the group a fun and inviting place for them to be in the first place. So the point of the arts is if we can make that a fun and inviting place to be through drama, through that parachute, whatever that might be, what's amazing is to see how that then, it was like a horticultural lesson, wasn't it? That was more structured, but they were all able to access the same classroom for the same time. And I wonder, but our experience feels like there's a distinct link between the trust that's built in that playful space where there's less demand, more freedom, more expression, that then they can look and go, actually, you weren't that bad in the last session. I'll come in this time.
Because I work with rainbows and guides, occasionally brownies and cubs. They get to know me as Mist, and we run the sessions. And wherever I go around my village, there's always a youngster going, Mist, 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 even if they've been out of rainbows 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, those connections are really powerful, aren't they?
And their parents are like, I don't remember this person. And they've come up to me.
Yeah.
Big cuddle, and I'm like, what are you doing at school?
Yeah.
What's the problem? Well, do you think maybe you should tell mummy that?
Yeah, those connections are, it's really nice to hear that, within a different context and that power. And I think it is all of those different things, the joy, the free to be themselves, what I like to refer to as the slight chaos in the classroom of what's going to happen next, and the big parachute and sort of rules go a little bit sideways and it's all a bit fun and exciting, that then helps to build those relationships and build that sense of, oh no, we can do this. This is fun.
Neighbour and friend happens to be the unit leader, and everybody loves sunshine. Everybody adores her, and I'm more strict with them. I'm the one that keeps the structure, if you know what I mean.
You have to have some structure.
And you would think that they absolutely despise me for that. But one girl that I was batting heads with for weeks and weeks, literally the entire session, I was off ill and she was the first one to ask where I was.
Definitely. There's definitely that balance of, I always say, you can't start with the chaos. You have to start with the structure. That's your backbone. That's your safety pin. That's what they understand. I remember when I first wrote my dissertation, my first draft of it, I was like, oh, and interestingly, this clashes with the sort of research-informed principles of structure, routine, teach-based learning, all of that. And I felt that the artist in me was like, oh, I'm breaking all the rules. That's cool. That's great. And then my mentor turned to me and said, actually no, you've set up a structure, you've given them the structure through your schedules and through your routine. And what's expected in the structure is for them to break the rules. That becomes your new structure. It's not that you're not structured. You have to have that. It's just then how you play with that. The power to connect families as well. We really want this to be a space where families can come together and share these experiences together. These are just a few examples. We used to do a sort of Glastonbury day, a bit like the festival day here. So you're already starting to do some of those things, and I think it's a great space where they can come and also see. This is an example of one of the flute theatre, the Shakespeare sessions here, where the brothers and the siblings all get invited as well. And I think it's a really beautiful experience where they're in a space, particularly in a cultural venue, where anything goes and they're free to be them. And I think the impact of that on the family, of seeing how their child's respected in that space, and as, you know, they walk into the room as artists. You know, artists want to be original. They want to be different. They're always working to be outside of the box. Our kids do that with everything. They're already the experts at that. They pick up a toy and they play with it in the most unique way possible. We do a drama exercise with the staff where you have to transform an object into something else. Our kids do that all the time. They are the experts. So it's one of those spaces where they can walk in a little bit on top. And I think that's quite rare for their families and for them. So staff teams as well, we've spoken quite a lot about this. The joy of a Christmas show, I wrote, just it can be really tricky to work in an organisation like this. You can be, especially if you've been here for years and years, it can be, you know, emotionally quite intense. It can be quite full on. And I think the impact that it can have on staff teams and then the impact that trickles down to the children is quite phenomenal through performances, through training, through just the sessions themselves. And I know, yeah, Tanya, you touched on that a little bit.
We ran some training during one of our training weeks for some of the education team, and we played some games. So we played Grandma's Footsteps. We did, as Elise said, we gave them a different prop and asked them to transform it in as many different ways as you could. And then we also kind of played a bit of a charades game. So it was amazing, the staff kind of enjoyment, the engagement, the joy, the laughter, the talking, the kind of connectivity. And as Elise was saying, obviously sometimes, you know, staff can work in an environment where it can be quite challenging, and actually just to have that moment to release and play. And we saw staff who normally are very different in how they presented themselves during this playful experience. And I think it just kind of illuminated staff in this is what the arts can do. And we wanted to kind of let staff know that, you know, if you get this involved and you're this happy and you're this kind of positive about it with the young people, then we're going to kind of project kind of our enjoyment, and the young people will enjoy as well, and it will kind of build from there. But yeah, it was fantastic to kind of see how much the staff kind of connected with it.
The power to be heard as well. So this is, like I was explaining, I've worked with a few resource spaces within mainstream schools as well. So this might be slightly different to the profile of children that we have here. But this idea of the power to be heard as well. And what I think is interesting for her is that the idea of a character gave her a safe space to express her experiences, and quite a lot of, you know, the crossovers between trauma and autism is really quite big, because in general their lives can be very traumatic, even from a sensory perspective, from everything. And this for her really gave her, I really saw how that allowed her to step up and express things that we would never have been able to discuss just as me and her, but through that character and through that sense of self. And she actually ended up performing this. I mean, it was all pre-recorded, but she actually was on the stage at the Royal Albert Hall in one of the rooms upstairs and shared this with a whole audience. And actually how powerful that is to take something that you struggle with and your experience and to share that in a positive, affirmed way was really, really powerful for her. And on the flip side of that, the non-speaking, more sensory pupils, it's a way because they are non-verbal means of expression. Art, drama, music, dance, it's all through the body, it's all through sound, through things that doesn't require words. Most of the drama training as well is like, start with the body, forget the words, forget the script, put it aside. It's about what's happening in here. If you can't get it rooted in your body first, there's no point in accessing the script. So yeah, the point I want to highlight here is that this is really an amazing thing. This was a project we did for, I think it was it was a human rights campaign that we did at the school. And yeah, I mean, very explicitly for every child, every right, but every single child in the school contributed to that in some playful way. And that was then elevated up. So it's to try and sort of really, we want every single child in this provision to benefit from access and be able to express themselves. And yes, we will have to change what the word performance means or the expectations of what a performance is when parents or families come or individuals come, and finding different ways and creative ways for them to contribute to a process, but they all can and will do that. The power to build future pathways as well. This is Tim and me going to Tina Turner, the musical. I took him to Back to the Future a couple of weeks ago. This is an ex-pupil of mine. He's now 27, and I take him to the theatre about twice a year. It's going to the theatre has become such an integral, he's quite a Jamie Lawrence character, is what I would say. He's very that. And this has now become such an integral part of his yearly structure. And we've been doing it for 8 years now. And he really is like, summer we do this, Christmas we do this. And it's such a joyful, it's a way for us to have reconnected. I mean, I'm obviously not his teacher now, but we're actually kind of friends now. We've sort of developed past that, and we share this interest together. And it's become something that he really, really loves. And I think it's that whole aspect of developing recreational passions for the pupils that they can take on into their futures, either within the community settings, and we'll talk a bit about those partnerships that we want to facilitate as well, or through just listening to it by yourself as well. But it's got that whole recreational aspect, but it also has a more formal work experience programme or influence, which we are going to try and recreate here. But last year I worked with the Royal Albert Hall to co-develop a work experience programme for autistic individuals, and the ones that we're accessing were the more sort of resource-based children in general, but I really pushed it with Louis. He is 100% would match the profile of young people here. His emotional regulation can be very, very challenging at times, but he is incredibly creative. And we worked really slowly and delicately with the hall in order to provide a space and adjust everyone's expectations and make sure that all the risk assessments were in place and make sure we all had an understanding of that, so that he could then go, and he did his 6-week work experience programme where he explored lighting, set design, stage management, I think it was, like all of these different roles. And he did it and he got his certificate, and that is a huge achievement for him. We'll then start to try and right now it's in a work experience level. Then we're going to start thinking about what the next steps are in terms of employment and actual pathways in that sense. And I know there are a few charities that are looking to really promote that, especially in the London area, but the dream is there, and then we take one step, but this is a big step towards that. Also, the power to excel as well. I think quite a lot of people, the sort of assumption around when they see Rain Man, they see something like that, they're like, all autistic children have a savant level skill, and that can be, not particularly accurate. I mean, I think they all have some level of savant skill in the way that they engage with something in their life, for sure, but in terms of these skills. But it also is a space where certain individuals can really, really shine. So this is an example of Callum, who just has one of those maths brains. Emotional regulation-wise, 2-to-1 support, very, very difficult in his own complete space within the school. But he managed to, last year, get his grade 7 exam, where we actually had to take him to an organisation to develop it. He was completely naked 15 minutes before, and we had to really, it was that, I just want to give you the context of how, big of achievement that was for him to even access that space and the time, but we did it, we got through it, he achieved it with distinction and absolutely flew through, and this is self-taught. So he just picks it up. He then translated with the maths brain what the music meant, because we didn't have a music teacher at the time. So we were just working with him to give him the right environment and access that. He also would go into the different shopping centres and play on the piano as well to try and sort of get that self-esteem going. But this is also a key emotional regulation strategy for him. If he's up here, the only thing that will really bring him back down is the piano. And I think in terms of, yes, we want to develop passions, but also those sort of regulatory techniques and strategies for him as well. The power to excel, again, this is one of our students that won. The Royal Academy have a young artist show every year where they have 50,000 submissions in, and then it goes into an exhibition at the RA. And this is one of the pieces that was successful. Again, Ade is a non-speaking, quite a complex individual, and this was where he shone, and he just drew. It was doodles in my mind. He just drew everything that came into his mind. There's bits of pizza, there's Cartoon Network, there's designs, there's all, really gives you that sense of who he is in that picture. And it's finally, I think, arts institutions are beginning to realise that they are the experts and they have high artistic value and credit, because the arts is a place where originality can flourish and originality has high value. And finally, institutions and cultural organisations are beginning to recognise this and appreciate this in a non-tokenistic way, in a way where they really are valued as artists. This was another sort of drama example of that. We did an amazing project a couple of years ago at the Royal Albert Hall where it's called Music Makes Me, and it had a choir of about 1,000 mainstream primary pupils that were working, but they were learning songs that were specifically inspired and written to articulate an autistic individual's experience. So the focus was on autism, and one of my students, Juliana, was the main role in that. And then she had 1,000 mainstream pupils. You can imagine the preparation that took as well behind her, singing songs about her experience. Not necessarily she informed the narrative, but it was taken from lots of different autistic experiences of how it was. And it was just one of those special moments where you just go, things are changing now. Things are really changing, and it's a really hopeful and exciting time to be working on a project like this. I mean, we can't believe our luck. Yeah. We're just we're so thrilled, but this just goes to show that, this is our ambition for here as well. And just to give you a little bit of an insight into what that day was and the power of inclusion.
Area, as it's so bespoke and so new, an area where we can conduct some further research, and also offer training both internally to staff, and then hopefully over time we can start to develop that and open that more widely. And we've developed a curriculum that is going to be bespoke to Priors Court to develop the learning and engagement for the young people. So as Elise said before, we are looking at being able to collaborate with external artists and external companies. So currently we have spoken with the Watermill, who are a local theatre company, and they've been fantastic in coming into school, coming to see some of the young people, having a conversation with Elise and I about how we could work together and moving forward, both with them coming into the school to bring actors to support the young people to develop their skills, and also to develop the young people's skills out in the community. We've had conversations with Arlington Arts about the potential of looking at how we can develop their programme of the arts for young people with autism. So about not necessarily just making it that the music's turned down slightly and therefore it's a more adapted performance, but looking at can we create sensory spaces within the theatre where the young people can still have the experience that everybody else is having, but in a smaller place where they feel safer. We are going to go and visit Frozen Light, who are a theatre company who work with people with PMLD. Bamboozle are also a fantastic company who offer training, and they run a bespoke model on how to support kind of engagement with young people with autism. We're really fortunate to get some funding for some pantomimes that we ran over the Christmas period. So Head to Head Sensory Theatre came in for our lower school, and we had Tales production for our post 16. So as you can see, we've got lots of companies that we're already collaborating with, and it's great that we're able to kind of develop their skills, because when we talk about kind of the young people here and the expectations we have for them, and a lot of the companies kind of you know, they've worked with young people with autism or children who are maybe not in mainstream education. But obviously the children here, their needs are more complex. But it's great to see kind of the response that we're getting from all these different companies who want to develop their skills by working with the young people here. So what does our curriculum look like? So the curriculum will work within music, dance and drama, and it is taken from the Sounds of Intent framework. So that was initially a research-based framework that focused on music, but it looks at kind of how people are reactive to it, proactive, and engage with different areas, initially of music, but now we've moved into how that also works across dance and drama.
Yeah, I think the framework was designed with PMLD needs in mind. So I think for this cohort here, it's a really helpful starting point for us because it really simplifies everything. Right, it takes us right back to that just very much like exposure level. And then, but it's also simultaneously incredibly ambitious. I don't know whether you, I mean, you know, Derek Pavanic, his music teacher is the Sounds of Intent founder. So it's all linked with, yes, okay, it's that very initial stages of sort of co movements where it's just maybe like sort of hand over hand or joint experiences, but then also Derek Pavanic, who's like an exceptional musician who's performing sort of worldwide and that. So it's a very ambitious curriculum, but with very realistic starting points. Oh, that's it.
I think that's it.
I think that was 1 hour. But yeah, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask as well.